Okay, well, thanks very much for your time, gentlemen. This is Mike Anthony. I'm at the Ross Business School. You likely can see the front entrance. It's a very nice facility. I'm here relatively frequently working with colleagues here. And we have on the call with us Andrew Green, my colleague from the University of Michigan, and we also have Fred Grable from the International Code Council. Fred, are you able to say a little something about what you do there at ICC?
Yes, I don't know why I'm getting sound out of my speakers now. Anyhow, what we do, what ICC does, boy, this is just a problem here. Sorry, give me a minute. I don't understand why I can't make this quiet. Because I have a problem with me talking and then reverberating back out of my speakers. Okay, still hear me?
I can, yep. How about you, Andrew? Yep.
Great, 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 great. I got the speaker off on my end. Anyhow, what the International Code Council is a membership organization made up of jurisdictions. And when I mean jurisdictions, I mean counties, cities, states who have to enforce codes in order to get buildings built with some an appropriate amount of safety concerns addressed. And how this organization works is that we are promulgators of codes, of international codes. That means that we are a mechanism for those jurisdictions, those member jurisdictions, to put together a model set of codes through a consensus process. So what happens is that anybody can bring a proposal to the development process and have it heard in a public forum and have certain rights to have, testimony back and forth about each proposal, and then there are technical committees who decide whether to recommend or not recommend each proposal. And then there is a public comment phase, which is written public comments to those proposals to address certain concerns that the committee might have. And then in the end, the membership voters, this is ICC members, have governmental voters who decide whether those proposals go or not go forth into the next edition of the code. That's basically how it operates. And we have been, we've been given status by federal law to operate as a nonprofit organization in order to enact, to put together these model codes. Now, again, I use the term model code because it's really a forum to put together, again, a model code is a basis for jurisdictions to start with in their adoption process to make that code into law. And again, that's called an adoption process. So each jurisdiction, whether it be a county, a city, or a state, goes through a process to say, okay, we're going to look at this code and we're going to see if we like everything in it. And if we don't like some things in it, we'll amend the code, add to it, subtract from it, and then they'll vote on it as a city, state, or county and say this now becomes the law. And I do mean by law. I mean, it has to be written into the statutes of whatever jurisdiction is in order for it to be enforceable, because ICC is just a promulgator where they help put together everybody's proposals to make these model codes. We have no enforcement abilities, nor should we, because it's really up to the final person who is enforcing the code at the jurisdiction level, and that's usually called the code official. So that, in a nutshell, is who we are and how it happens. And I'm sure you were all stunned by that. So what else would you like to know? Mike, are you there?
Uh-oh.
I think I just unmuted myself.
Yeah, now you're on.
Good, yeah. I know there's a little bit of background noise. I should tell that our listeners, I did not expect that there would be so many students here on the weekend before the winter break. This is the Washington President's Day weekend, and it's nominally a 4-day holiday for our students here. But they always add a little bit of life. As I say, there's a lot of resources I have here at the business school. So that's, to repeat those who hadn't heard this earlier, that's where we're at now, Ross School of Business. But I wanted to go back again. I started to talk a little about the Code of Hammurabi, and that there was a rule there, I believe, that if a builder built a building and that building fell down on somebody, that building, that builder would meet a similar demise. And so that was some of the inspiration for building codes. And of course, fast forward a few thousand years, and we have, let's say up until about the year 2000, we had about maybe 4 or 5 codes that seem to have evolved around regions and geographies. There was a Southern Building Council, there was an East and Central, and then around the year, so those are the states in those areas. Let's just say maybe there might have been 10 or 15 states that developed their own code and sort of amalgamated around some of the concepts that were specific to their geography and climate. Then in about 2000, the ICC was formed, and that's what we have now. And you have a process, I like to call the process a marketplace of ideas, a leading practice discovery platform. And what you're seeing now is that ICC is adapted to the internet, and they have developed a group of experts that work in a way that seems to the best way we have right now for getting safety concepps and economic concepts in the same market, much the way the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange or the ICC, actually there's an ICC too, isn't there, for the international, or the Forex rather, is the currency exchange. In any case, it's a place for ideas and where experts can exchange thoughts about what is safe. I think in general there is in every jurisdiction. I think you were very astute to say that it's ultimately up to the local jurisdictions. You're developing a product that might be, say, the minimum speed limit for safety, but other jurisdictions are allowed to say, well, look, maybe we want our cars to go faster. Other jurisdictions say we want our cars to go slower. How did I do there for a quick metaphorical explanation there, Fred?
Excellent. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, excellent. I think that's a good summation.
Okay, good. Well, all right, then. There are some distinctions, though, I wanted to make, and that's what the topic of the Technology Transfer and Advancement Act is. And again, I'm going to let you talk because everybody hears me talk every week. But there is we try to make a point here, and we try to understand that what we're trying to do here is to spend our money wisely. And as you can see, that I've tried to say we are spending other people's money, and we know that these standard development processes, whether they are ANSI accredited or they're the ICC process or the there's many other different type of consortia that don't that don't use American National Standards processes. But if you go into some of the deeper literature here, some of these other links, you'll see that the United States is really, this law was put into effect because the lesson learned over so many centuries of technological development was that most of the innovations are occurring what I call from the work point. They're inspired there by different experiences that experts have and even non-experts have, the users have. And so governments around the world have said this is part of our strategy for advancing our nation technologically. So in the United States, the manifestation of that idea comes in this act. And what we try to say here is that it didn't come out of nowhere. It evolved. And in its evolution, it pulled together many things. But I think in some ways, it did take some of the innovation that came out as a consequence of the space program, and so the space program started to wind down at least one leg of it, around this time period, and we wanted to get a lot of federal research driven into the private market. And that's what this law pulled together, these ideas, and then it oops, I'm sorry about that, and then it began to be adopted, and then from that a lot of different organizations evolved to meet the need and to execute that. Do you have any thoughts, any personal experiences with this, Fred, before I go on any further?
No, not really.
Okay then, so where we start to step onto more sensitive territory, however, was that part of the law, there was an addendum to this. So I think that if we go back here, you'll see that this was principally a legislative. It came out of the legislative branch, but now there was amendment from the executive branch, and here's where the executive branch says, we want you to participate in this process. The government is as important a stakeholder as manufacturers, insurance, and labor, and we're entrusted to try to seek the greater good as best we can find it. You know, there's not always agreement on what that is, but regardless, there's a process for discovering what that might be. And here's where we find that the tension between the legislative and the executive branch might manifest itself, because in many cases it's felt that executive departments like Department of Energy, EPA, and others are intervening in these processes in a way that makes it difficult, or it intensifies the legislative or the executive action to a degree that not all stakeholders can participate. We like to say it's the standards action comes at us, and our particular interest is at a disadvantage because you reach consensus by attrition. I mean, the velocity and the amount of ideas that are being put through on these processes are so onerous that there's only a few organizations and people that are able to deal with it. And when I look at the ICC webcast of your conferences, and you're very good about showing all the meetings. We attended them personally, but we also showed your webcast. That it's a very formidable process. It looks like it looks twice the size of a United Nations when I see it. Any thoughts on that, Fred?
Well, yeah. When I first started 8 years ago, 8+ years ago, and I was introduced to this whole process, I had no idea how it all comes down. It was just overwhelming. You know, all the people that come, and the hours and hours and hours and hours, for days and days and days, of testimony about every little nuance about everything that has to do with buildings and building safety and all this. And things do get hashed out considerably in a public forum, and all parties get to see and understand, where everybody's coming from. And even myself, thinking that I know pretty much about a particular subject, am surprised by what somebody might say. And you say, oh, I never thought about that. And that's what the whole point is about these hearings, is that everybody gets to understand where everybody else's point of view is, and you adjust things during the public comment period to adjust the proposal to accommodate certain features of the proposal to make everybody happy, so that it will eventually be successful and be put into the code book and then eventually into law. So yeah, it is a formidable process. I can't say that I'm looking forward to sitting through all that again this spring, but that's the way it is.
Well, I'm a veteran of the process. I've been holding the education facilities industry's vote on the NEC for the better part of 20 years now, so it is grueling. It is grueling. We have our meetings in January and December, and you will be working from 7 to 6, sometimes 7 to 7. If you're lucky, then you get a task force. We've got so many issues that are similar, but we need to treat them all respectfully. So you're working till 11 o'clock. You will never see sunshine unless you go out for lunch for a few minutes. So,
That is correct.
But it's a love of the action, and you feel that you're really resolving a lot of technical issues that have an enormous economic impact and safety impact. And I should like to say that very often we have to speak about economics and safety separately, but in many ways they're very much the same. So one particular, again, going into the sensitive areas here, is that as we started to say, that the policing powers of any given local jurisdiction, the building inspector, the fire marshal, that is a fairly well-known budget, and that person usually has to go to the meeting. They're the person, I know they're the state of Michigan. We have a number of the state officials who will be at the meeting. What we feel is that when I see that how do we say, that assembly of experts on your webcast, and I think we're looking over maybe the better part of 500 heads there. When I look at the cameras, they're generally building inspectors, and there's not anybody who's paying for a building. There's not anybody there insuring a building, although the inspection authority is very often allied with the insurance interest. So what would your response be if I were to say that the financing of building inspectors, that their role in this process of building a safe environment, that they are funded well enough, and that it tends, when you have only building inspectors voting, what do you think? And many of my colleagues for many years are building inspectors, put it that way, and typically building inspectors and what I'll call conformity assessment enforcers or compliance officers generally, they're much more knowledgeable, frankly, than users. How do you respond to the statement or the assertion that the building codes will tend to favor the interest of the safety interest? And I say that at some risk, because at some peril, because I'm not a person that's against safety. But of course, I am spending public money, and safety does have a cost, and that's why it's a very sensitive discussion. But how do you respond to that, Fred? That the ICC suite is generally dominated by the building code and enforcement community.
Well, let me start from at the end and work backwards. Certainly, at the end of the process, the final decision to include something in a code is made by the governmental members the governmental voting members of the International Code Council membership. In the same way is that states and are given a number of like in the primaries, I think it is. I have to pardon my ignorance of the actual voting systems of the United States. I've forgotten all that. But basically, a state has so many voting members in order to vote for something. And the same way with ICC, a jurisdiction has so many voting members associated with it. It's not all of the inspectors. It's not all of the code officials. There are only certain numbers of people within the ICC membership who have voting rights. And it's done by the size of the jurisdiction. Obviously, someplace like Atlanta has much bigger area, and they're given so many voting member slots, so to speak. But a little small state that doesn't have much at all will have fewer. So that just gives you an idea of how the voting is divvied up. Now, the next thing is, the way I work backwards in this thing, is that in previous years, the people who voted at the final action of the process, which is in the fall, they had to be physically at the hearing to make that vote. The process has changed, where now we're moving into an electronic situation, and now voters can vote remotely. After the public comment hearing, we're changing the last hearing in the fall to what is called the public comment hearing. There's a vote that happens there that makes some decisions, but beyond that actual public hearing, the remote voters can vote to finalize what actually goes into the process. One of the problems was that people didn't have the time nor the money. Jurisdictions just don't have the time for their people nor the money to devote towards sending people to the hearing to make these votes. So they felt they were getting left out, and so that's what the membership decided to do, and what the board of directors was decided to do, was told to do, is like, hey, we want to be able to participate without having to be at the hearings. And so that's what's happening. Now, to the point that you said about that the audience is, and the people who are making the decisions are all inspectors, code official people. Yes, the people who are making the actual vote are the ICC governmental voting members, but there are lots of other people at these public hearings, especially at the final, the public comment hearing. There are consultants, there are manufacturers, there are lots of other people who are getting up and testifying about what is in front of them as a proposal. And they bring forth all sorts of information about why or why not the proposal should go forward or not. Now, as you said, Mike, you're not against safety, but there is a cost impact to safety. For instance, I mean, you know, if the fire code people had anything to do with it, all buildings would be built out of concrete. You know, nothing would burn, and you know, there wouldn't be any flammable stuff in there and all that. But the code officials are smarter than that, and knowing that, look, you know, all sorts of buildings have to be able to be built in our jurisdiction, and if you were too restrictive, people just won't come to the jurisdiction. Businesses and homeowners will say, you know, that's just way too onerous to go live or have a business, because the cost of construction is way too high because you were requiring such stiff penalty for building anything. So they know that they have to be flexible or the jurisdiction will just die. I mean, there won't be any growth, there won't be any changeover, and so they have to keep in mind the cost of safety. And in our proposals, and in most proposals, I think, I've looked around in other standards promulgators and things that they are doing, they discuss cost. They say, you know, is your proposal going to increase the cost of construction, or will it not increase the cost of construction? And this year, ICC, has started to require that a substantiation statement be made about why they chose one of the two statements, will or will not increase the cost of construction, so that the committee and everybody else understands why that cost is, or, you know, what comprises, what made you say why you made that statement. Before, we didn't ask that. People were just, you know, put down either it will or it won't cost or increase the cost of construction. So cost is a major consideration in safety, and you have to be flexible, and the code officials know that. It's just, it's inherent to the process. The code officials aren't stupid about it. I mean, it's pretty amazing. You'd think that the process would be so far leaning toward the safety side that they just ignored cost. And it just isn't that way. I've seen it time and time again where they don't vote on something that is like, you know, a really, really safe item, but it costs so much money, it's just impractical to bring it into the code.
Yeah, you mentioned the Atlanta. I think ICC is headquartered in Atlanta. Is that correct?
No, that is not.
I'm sorry. Where are you? Are you Chicago?
We actually have 4 offices. One is in Bray, California, which is, you know, West Coast, of course, and then here in the Chicago area, we have an office where I am at. We have an office in Birmingham, Alabama, and we have a office in Washington, D.C., primarily to keep abreast of all the, you know, public laws and to do lobbying with the federal people to make sure that code officials, because, you know, where code officials get their monies from is ultimately the federal government.
Yeah. Funny, I'm moving us a little bit along the agenda here. You mentioned the Atlanta, and so this particular structure came to mind. Are you able to see this?
Yes.
Okay, so I think my colleague at NFPA, Robert Solomon, told me that they had to make some special dispensation for this. I like your comparison with fire code officials would want all of our buildings to be built of stone, and that would mean then that the cities that were able to build fancier buildings would probably get the business. Those cities would grow, and the cities whose buildings were made of stone would not grow, and they would lose their job, right? I heard
exactly.
This is quite a bit of a challenge here to develop this particular. I've stayed here for a couple conferences, and in any case, I thought I'd bring that up. Okay, well, that's very insightful. I'm glad you brought that one up. So I think one area here that I wanted to get into, so we dealt with the composition of the ICC process and how it might conforms to the general national strategy for technology transfer and advancement. There are a lot of innovations happening in the fenestration area. That doesn't mean there's not a lot of things. There's not a market making going on in those areas. Well, this is America after all, and you are entitled to sell your product in any ethical way possible, including through the lobbying process. I wanted to bring our audience attention to, this is the memo here. I think it's the parent memo. A19 was the parent legislation from the executive branch, but now this was taken to another level here by more recently, where our chief technology officers and Mr. Sunstein says that we respect the existing process, blah, 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 but we might need to move a little further. And he uses the word convene here. Somewhere you're going to see the word convene. And that means you better hurry up and move fast, because we don't think that the process, well, he doesn't say it that way, but this is my interpretation of it, so I'll make that disclaimer, that we need to move faster, folks. And not only, that's a document that tries to make that statement, but now they take it a step further, and I think this was even a revision to A19. So we are running out of time, and I'm also running out of battery here. So this might be worth seeing. So to summarize where we've been, we've covered this National Technology Transfer Act, which was a culmination of many years of legislation to try to encourage the private sector and also to roll in some of the advancements from the space program. We find now that's a legislative, that's inspired by the legislative branch. We now see the White House saying, yes, we shall engage in this process here. Obviously it was signed by Bill Clinton. And then we have two more. They're tightening the screws on industry here with these other statements coming from the executive branch. So I think it's fair to say, and I think it's fair to point out, that ICC is an ANSI member, and they have one or two ANSI accredited standards. Is that the fire code? But in general, I don't think that all of their documents are ANSI accredited in the same way that NFPA and ASME and ASHRAE are. Do I have that right, Fred?
That is correct.
Yeah. So,
however, our process is recognized by the federal government as being an equivalent to an ANSI process. We have due process in our method of doing it.
that's right. So it doesn't have the ANSI halo, but in general, and that doesn't mean the ANSI process is perfect either. Markets aren't perfect, and so we have to be mindful. We have to be mindful of that. So I think that's pretty much our 30-minute limit here. There's always much more nuance we could cover, but I think Friday afternoon academia, we're just sitting back reflecting upon what we're doing over the past week. The work looks good, and I invite everybody else. I don't know what next week's topic might be. I think we may have to deal with some more economic issues. I think it may well be the size of the industry. I believe that there are questions coming about where do you get this $300 billion. So my hope is that we'll get that covered next week as kind of a topic that deals more with the broader picture. As you can see here, Fred, we work every day. I guess you got it done, didn't you? Thanks,
Yes,
Andrew.
sir.
Yeah, I got it done. So every day we put our hand in the water and we pull out one of 100 issues that come at us or are relevant to us. And so you see every day here a new standard, a new federal or international standard. We actually made some proposals. And wait a second, Fred. Were these the proposals you looked over here for the plumbing code? I think that was you, wasn't it?
I don't know whether I did that. Yeah, I guess they are, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll have to go back. I think I owe you some answers on this one, too. I'll have to get back to the shop. But in general, we felt that, this is an example where we felt that our experience is the pipes are so large that we're losing energy because the end-use equipment, the fixtures themselves have gone down, toilets and hot water and other shower heads, but we're not seeing the pipes change. And it's very similar to the National Electrical Code, where we've had a good success making our demand lower, but our infrastructure from the service up to that is oversized. And anyway, so you can see here that every day we have a new, we come up with a new idea. It's only, what I say, we're only getting about 1% of it, but we feel that we're better than we were last year. Maybe next year we'll get 10% of it, but we need to be effective in the long run. And so getting ideas out there every day is what we do. And because I work across so many platforms, I can say with I can say with some confidence and I think authority that the ICC process is an effective one in service of public safety and also economy. And as I like to say, we're too large an industry not to be in this space. And I believe that apart from other universities who have special experts or universities that are affiliated with the Department of Energy like Georgia Tech, that we're probably out front, and we don't want to be out front for its own sake. We want to see our colleagues devote resources to participating in this idea marketplace that is available to all. So, are there any final? Did I miss anything, Fred? Do you have a moment here to make some final closing statements on what we've done here today?
I think it's really good that you do take a little time. I think all technical professionals do need to step back and think about what are you doing here in the bigger picture. And I think we all lose sight of that when grinding through the day-to-day activities. So this is a good thing.
Still there, Mike?
Did I mute myself accidentally?
I think so.
I guess I did. Okay. Well, anyway, I was saying nice things about you guys. Shall I repeat them?
Sure.
No. Again, thanks. Grateful for your time, Fred. It's helpful. Everyone hears me. You're welcome to come in another 6 months to talk to us a little bit. You're always welcome, and we appreciate the ICC process as one that helps our industry meet its objectives. As we like to say, we're using every tool possible to manage our costs, and we found that this one works for us. We have a lot of cultural changes we've got to deal with. You can change the code, but you cannot get a lot of people that simply don't want to change out of fear or stubbornness or some other reason. But that's a different teleconference. So.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much for your time, gentlemen, and I will see you on the Worldwide Inner Tube somehow. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye now.